Hey everybody, welcome to Triggered Care. I'm Alex. Today I'm going to be sharing with you one of my favorite chapters from one of my favorite books from one of my favorite authors, John Steinbeck, from his book East of Eden. So, hopefully you enjoyed this and find some connectedness with it like I did. So here we go. A child may ask, "What is the world's story about?" And a grown man or woman may wonder, What way will the world go? How does it end? And while we're at it, what's the story about? I believe that there is one story in the world, and only one, that has frightened and inspired us, so that we live in pearl-white cereal of continuing thought and wonder. Humans are caught in their lives, in their thoughts, in their hungers and ambitions, in their avarice and cruelty, and in their kindness and generosity too, in a net of good and evil. I think that the only story we have that it occurs on all levels of feeling and intelligence. Virtue and vice were warp and woof of our first consciousness, and they will be the fabric of our last, and this despite any changes we may impose on field and river and mountain, on economy and manners. There is no other story. A man, after he has brushed off the dust and chips of his life, will have left only the hard, clean questions. Was it good or was it evil? Have I done well or ill? Herodotus in the Persian War tells a story of how Croesus, the richest and most favored king of his time, asked Solon the Athenian a leading question. He would not have asked it if he had not been worried about the answer. Who, he asked, is the luckiest person in the world? He must have been eaten with doubt and hungry for reassurance. Solon told him that 3 lucky people in old times, and Croesus more than likely did not listen, so anxious was he about himself. And when Solon did not mention him, Croesus was forced to say, "Do you not consider me lucky?" Solon did not hesitate in his answer. "How can I tell?" he said. "You aren't dead yet." And this answer must have haunted Croesus dismally as his luck disappeared, and his wealth and his kingdom. And as he was being burned on tall fire, he may have thought of it, and perhaps wished he had not asked or had not been answered. And in our time, when a man dies, if he had had wealth and influence and power and all the vestments that arouse envy, and after the living takes stock of the dead man's property and his eminence and works and monuments, the question is still there. Was his life good or evil? Which is another way of putting Croesus's question. Envies are gone, and the measuring stick is, was he loved or was he hated? Is his death felt as a loss, or does a kind of joy come of it? I remember clearly the deaths of 3 men. One was the richest man of the century who, having clawed his way to wealth through the souls and bodies of men, spent many years trying to buy back the love he had forfeited, and by that process performed great service to the world, and perhaps had much more than balanced the evils of his rise. I was on a ship when he died. The news was posted on the bulletin board, and nearly everyone received the news with pleasure. Several said, "Thank God, that son of a bitch is dead." Then there was a man, smart as Satan, who, lacking some perception of human dignity and knowing all too well every aspect of human weakness and wickedness, used his special knowledge to warp men, to buy men, to bribe and threaten and seduce until he forced himself in a position of great power. He clothed his motives in the name of virtue, and I have wondered whether he ever knew that no gift will ever buy back a man's love when you have removed all of his self-love. A bribed man can only hate his briber. When this man died, the nation rang with praise, and just beneath with gladness that he was dead. There was a third man who perhaps made many errors in performance, but whose effective life was devoted to making men brave and dignified and good in a time when they were poor and frightened, and when ugly forces were loose in the world to utilize their fears. This man was hated by few. When he died, the people burst into tears in the streets, and their minds wailed, "What can we do now? How can we go on without them?" In uncertainty, I am certain that underneath their topmost layers of frailty, men want to be good and want to be loved. Indeed, more of their vices are attempted shortcuts to love. When a man comes to die, no matter what his talents and influence and genius, if he dies unloved, his life must be a failure to him, and his dying a cold horror. It seems to me that if you or I must choose between two courses of thought or action, we should remember our dying and try to live that our death brings no pleasure to the world. We have only one story. All novels, all poetry are built on the never-ending contest in ourselves of good and evil. And it occurs to me that evil must constantly respawn, while virtue is immortal. Vice has always a new, fresh, young face, while virtue is venerable and nothing else in the world is. That story is from John Steinbeck's East of Eden, like I said before, chapter 34. And I shared that because that chapter always sticks with me. When I first read it, it really stuck with me, and I really appreciate how Steinbeck, he speaks in a language that I can very much relate to, and I very much appreciate, and that's part of the reason why I love his novels and I love his stories, is because he writes about human character and human struggle and human pain in a way that really, it's easy for me to digest, and not only that, it feels very cathartic when I read them. Like, I cry my eyes out a lot when I read them, but it feels really good in a way. And so, if you are looking for book suggestions, I highly suggest pretty much all John Steinbeck's work. So yeah, comment your thoughts if you liked it, if you didn't like it, if it moved you in any way, you know. That's just a really thought-provoking and nice chapter that I wanted to share with you guys. So, I hope y'all are having good ones and continue to have a good one.